Remind me in a few minutes to turn that back on. You slid it all the way off.
Is it off?
Yeah. I think. Check my phone, play music.
Okay. Hey, Ronnie.
How you doing, Ruby? You doing all right?
How about you?
All right.
Hey, Mark.
Hey,
How are you in there?
All right, how you doing?
Good.
Winter time.
Enjoying this weather.
You're enjoying the weather.
Enjoying this weather.
We're gonna run you out
I'll
of the shirt.
roll you right here in the middle of the
We're
floor.
gonna run you out of this shirt, boy. Can I walk?
We can't do anything about it. You may as well enjoy it, right?
You're right. You're
No.
right. You're right. You're
It makes
right,
me
Mark.
hurt.
You're not that old, Luke.
Don't matter.
That's the way I feel, Belinda.
Hi, Belinda.
How you doing?
I'm cold. How are you?
Jay. Oh, today, isn't it? Hey, man. Good, how are you?
Good.
How are you? Good. I think we had a teaser there for a few days. It was a little warm, but now it's supposed to get back Thursday and Friday. Huh? I think we're supposed to get back Thursday. Lord, I hope so. Me too.
I think we can get 1 day of decent weather. And then followed by a cold
Most color coordinated person I ever met.
That was by accident.
Entertain me.
If it works, it works.
Hi. I'm good. How are you? Good. Good.
Hi.
Girlfriend.
I was making kids in practice.
Doing Jeremy. Been here somewhere.
Hi. Hey.
Linda.
Straw. Hey.
Hey, I know you.
I think we'll cross paths. You all wouldn't believe how we don't ever have time to talk.
Tell me
They're
how-
all married.
Please tell me how you do that.
Yeah.
He works in one direction, I work in the other.
Yeah, we don't work from home that much.
I had to travel this week. Not overnight, but it's like, I forgot how to do it.
Maybe that's my feel for the year.
Man, you're sitting in sanctuary, man. Good point. Hey, Scotty, how are you? I'd do either or.
One of the worst things, I tease about.
Never heard that
with
one. I gotta
arthritis.
remember that.
The cold weather does make my joints hurt. One of the worst things is I have never been diagnosed, but I know I've got what's that thing they call, which is actually related to arthritis. But your fingers will get cold and they go numb, and it's a different finger. I mean, it'll just go white.
You know Danny Moore?
Yeah.
City cop.
Yeah.
Back like he
lives just around the corner from me.
he was like that. Cold always affected him. He said it didn't start till he came back from Vietnam.
Huh. Well, see, Kim Bryant
His
has the same
fingers, when
thing.
he'd get out in the cold, like in a traffic accident or something, if he had to be outside, his fingers would literally split open.
Yeah.
The skin would split.
But,
just from cold.
Gosh, what's it called? But anyway, it's a syndrome, and that's part of the reason I don't like cold weather because, I mean, if I get cold, one or two fingers, I mean, they'll just go completely numb. They'll go like it's like the circulation's gone.
Mine lock up.
So I just got to get it warm, And but,
I'll go to close it and I'll be one finger sticking. And all of a sudden it'll snap.
From cold? Or just all the time? Yeah.
I don't believe it's cold.
Raynaud is what it's called.
Old age, I think, called mine.
I don't have everybody. I walk every night in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And like last night, I was out and it was about.
Do you walk
9:30.
down in the lower end of your neighborhood?
Oh yeah. I walk. There's a mile loop that I do. I come up right up past that dead end section at the end of Woodlawn, close to where you're taking
You
your.
walk down there next to them apartments?
I used to live down there years
Did you?
ago.
I
Yeah.
don't know, I believe I walked around, carried guns with me the
I
whole
carry
time.
guns all the time, yeah. That's a given.
There was something going on down there last night. You didn't
There
talk about
always
the
is.
emails down
There
there.
always is.
He's got that covered.
Like, one lives at some point.
Yes, yeah, he lives in the 800 block. And then there's another one that's down on Bishop Street, Adam Jones. He lives down there. And then there's a state trooper that lives in the 700 block, but I think he's moved.
So
There's like 2 houses down there where there's always a cop living on Woodlawn. I don't know. And they just pass it, drop it, pass it on to each other.
just to warn you, because you're conscious about hearing yourself.
Yes.
You're going to hear yourself because our online mic had to move back here.
Okay.
The long cable is causing a lot of interference. So I have to make you a little hotter. I gotta make you hot, Mark.
You're gonna be busy. You got your work cut out for you.
So you will hear yourself. I've,
Cable
I'm
shield.
calling in sick today.
yeah, but it's a USB cable, and that's just too long.
USBs only go for about 30 feet.
Yeah, well, it goes all the way. We knew it would cause us a problem eventually, but it got to where it was just unbearable to listen to online. So, obviously, to get the
Maybe
podium,
I'm just too unbearable to listen to online.
to get the podium back here, we got to turn it up a little bit. So,
Rob's sick. Rob's sick.
he must have worked. He did physical work here yesterday. He's not used to that.
That's another one of those.
Do what?
Bring something meaningful out of it.
About last week? So we're short a team teacher, so we sent you up there and do last week's lesson.
Yep.
Jacob's journey. They're going to go on a journey. One of them, at some point. Hopefully, right? Yeah. That's the goal. Hopefully they don't find a heathen woman like Esau.
Preach it, brother. Preach it.
Harlots.
You're elected.
Well, I guess it's that time.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. I have my wife actually wears a button-up, 3-button right here, a taller one, but she's just worn off a polo shirt. It's too small for me. Right here. It's a polo. Actually, it's too big. It's small on me.
I wear a medium. I appreciate it, but
She ordered another one, a 2X, fat, and we don't have nobody. I mean, I'll find somebody, I guess. I just figured I'd ask you.
I appreciate it.
All the positive crap and all that stuff's going to be false. We're blaming him. Messing with the weather. Morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody out today. And hope everyone's enjoying this gorgeous weather we're having. By show of hands. There you go. I love it, right? It's wintertime. Still. Here in West Virginia. All right, nice to be here this morning. It is nice to see everybody here. Let's go ahead and go to prayer before we start Sunday school. Ask anybody anywhere if you have spoken prayer request. All right. Take it back.
Yeah, Bobby's mom, she's in the hospital right now, and her dad, and my family.
Ruby?
Remember my family. Remember Eileen and all those that were sick and ain't nothing to come to church. I don't think Eileen's done very good because she's still at Donna's. So usually she goes home when she's felt better. So.
She's hoping to go home towards the end of this week.
Yeah, probably won't stay long.
Wait for the spring thaw. All right, somebody else? Spoke with it? David?
Remember all my children, my grandchildren, and remember my brothers and sisters and Ronnie's mom.
Please remember Amanda, she's not there now.
Somebody else anywhere?
Remember God warned her friends with prayer.
Okay. Donna?
Still remember me and remember my family on the wall, that's my family and my brothers. Also, keep Angie in prayer, her daughter, she's a parent, she's 30 in May. Maybe simple to some people, but it's not going to be for us.
No simple surgery.
Just, remember, and do pray, that kind of approaches and be working out, she can get some help. Be able to motivate better than she has been. She's been working all this time, still yet on bad leg and bad foot situations. Some she was born with and some time has totally out the school. The kneecaps. Two of her, both of her ankles, but she really needs her prayers, most of all for her soul, that she do the right thing every now and then, and even not just for that, but she needs the Lord in her life. She knows what God is. Please hold her up in prayer from the time. Don't help the neighbors that stand in the prayer also. And I have some unspoken ones also.
I'd like the church remember me, one of these days, I'm going to be role at work. And still, when you've done something so long, the same, same position. I think I'm going to be fine, but there's always that, it's new. And, just remember me.
You'll do good. All right, anyone else want to speak any questions?
Also, I think it was Ruby that told me Debbie Stevens is in hospital.
Well, she's out now. Weeks ago she got out.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, she had COVID.
Yeah, she did ask that we would remember her in prayer. She's just got out of the hospital, but so she is recovering, but still desires our prayers.
Okay. Now, did I see your hand up? Okay. All right.
All of our shut-ins.
Yeah. All right, anyone else?
Remember Michelle, Chris's girlfriend, she did get a assistant manager position at Buffalo Highways, but most of all, remember her and Chris's all.
All right.
Remember Rusty and Marcia, I think they leave tomorrow for Texas.
Sure, everyone's going to prayer requests. So I'll stand if you would, please. Lots of prayer requests this morning. Just about every family represented here. Somebody's asked for prayer. So remember each of those as we go through this morning. And as always, let's remember to invite God into our service. That's what we're here for. We should never lose sight of that. Jeremy, do you mind leading us this morning, please?
Father, we are thankful to found the Lord's Day this morning, God. We are so grateful just for the desire of all of our hearts to see here. Thanks for down this morning as we come for Sunday school. Help us to trust you. We're here every day. Hear the news to share this morning. Jesus, say
Amen.
All right, before we start in the Sunday school, I'll also ask if anyone's read a verse or a passage you'd like to share with the rest of us. Bruce? All right.
This is out of Deuteronomy, chapter 32. I want to start at verse 28. For they are a nation holy and clean. Is there any understanding? Hope that they were wise, that they understood. That day was not considered their latter end. How should one take 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, except their rock had sold them in, the Lord had cut them up. For their rock is not with our rock, even our enemies and help and judge. For their vine is of the vine of Sodom and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gold, their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of dragons, and their full venom ash. Is not this laid up and stored with me and sealed up among my treasures? To me belong then do recompense, their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their family is at hand, and the things that shall come on them must be. God have a blessing for reading His holy word.
Thank you, Bruce. Anybody else today? Okay, we'll go ahead and get into our lesson then. The title of it this morning is Now One Wife Became Four. You know, when I first read the title of this lesson, I thought maybe we were being tricked and this was a horror story. Right in the middle of the Bible. I'm okay with one wife. Don't want or need four. But that's kind of what we're studying about this morning. Now, while it may not be a horror story, this account that we're going to read this morning and what we've been looking at for the last couple of weeks shows a level of deceit that you really wouldn't expect from people who are being used to help fulfill God's promise, would you? You know, when you think about who the good guy of the story is, you know, somebody that you're interested in reading about and you really get into it, you follow it, you know, you think of somebody that's more of a hero type, right? Now, today our society depicts heroes certain ways. It's always, you know, the tall, strong, good-looking people, you know, whether it's male or female or whatever. Sometimes they wear capes, whatever. But, you know, they are, we sort of have a stereotypical image when we think of who the good guy is or the hero of the story is. We don't really want to see the plain, unremarkable, kind of faulty, broken people that are, these are the heroes of the story here, or these are the people that are, you know, that we're really studying about. It seems sort of anti what we would normally do, especially showing, you know, their weaknesses, their imperfections, and all this stuff. But as it was pointed out in last week's lesson that Tim taught on, and this lesson this morning kind of takes up just immediately where his left off from last week. God doesn't need perfect people to get His will done, does He? I mean, we could all just take a look in the mirror or take a look at our own lives or whatever and say, I'm not a perfect person. I got lots of flaws. You know, or at least what we would consider the perfect or the ideal person to do His will. God's work, as we see over and over in the Bible, is very often carried out by far less than perfect people. It's actually sometimes with people that we might look at and be very judgmental about. I mean, you even take David. David was, he's certainly one of the heroes of the Bible, is he not? But he had a very checkered history. You know, sometimes he was great, sometimes not so good. But God still used him. God uses imperfect people to see His will done. Amen. So, you know, in spite of all the reverence, and you know, we're just a few generations here away from the father of the Jews, Abraham, right? Father Abraham. And in spite of all the reverence that has been given to Abraham, he's considered a righteous man. it didn't take too long for his offspring to start show that they were maybe a little less than righteous, right? I mean, we're talking about his grandson here, one of his two grandsons here. That's like, this guy's got some problems. So, and we're studying about Jacob. That's who we're studying about last week, week before, this week. I'm pretty sure next week too. I haven't read ahead. Maybe Tim has. But Jacob has already shown that he's capable of being a not quite so upright person, right? He's been less than honest. He's been deceitful. He has been willing to take advantage of others, his own brother, for his own personal gain, has he not? He's not the kind of person that we would consider the man that God would use to see his will done. We're like, why don't you pick somebody like that? And even though we can see that God's hand was at work in all of this stuff that's going on with Jacob, and of course we have the benefit of hindsight. We get to look back at the story. We know what happens. We know how things work out. And we know that God's work or God's hand was at work in all this. Jacob's deceit did not go without some consequences, did it? This is one of those, and I'm probably jumping ahead of my notes here just a little bit. I won't go there quite yet. Jacob is kind of a conniving person. His mother was kind of a conniving person, and he apparently inherited that trait. And apparently, from what we can read in this week's lesson, it's a family trait on the mother's side. So as last week's lesson told us, Jacob is in a point, before we start reading here today, Jacob's at a point where he needs to get away from home, right? Number one, his brother has made threats that after Isaac dies, Esau's going to get even with Jacob. So mom doesn't want that to happen, obviously, so she is going to send him off. So this journey that he took, that Tim started talking about last week, was it was twofold. So it was for his own personal safety to get away from home, but he's also been sent to get a wife. Time for him to marry. So just like his father before him, if y'all remember from maybe 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a month ago, Isaac was sent to get a wife as well, right? Abraham sent Isaac to get a wife. Now, what was the condition of getting a wife? Just pick anybody you liked. Back to their homeland, back to their people, and get a wife from there. These were godly people, not the pagan Canaanites that they were living among. And his dad did not want him to get mixed up with that. Now we see that Isaac has done the same thing with Jacob. Sent them, don't marry a Canaanite woman, you go back here. Now, mom is helping with this as well, but he was specifically told not to wed a Canaanite woman, right? Now, it's not part of our lesson this morning, but Esau goes after a wife too, and he decided to do exactly the opposite of what Dad said. So Jacob was sent to Rebekah's brother's family in, and I'm guessing on the pronunciation of this, Haran, the land that they came from, where Rebekah's family was from. At toward the end of Tim's lesson from last week, Jacob reached his destination, and through the handiwork of God, all the timing on this, he almost immediately, upon where he arrived, found his love at first sight, did he not? He came upon a well when he came into the land, which was his destination. He came upon a well where the flocks were watered, right about the same time that Rachel shows up to water her father's sheep. And Rachel just happens to be the daughter of his mother's brother. Okay? All right. Think all this is a coincidence? No. Again, God taking very imperfect people and working his will to get what he wanted done out of this. God had a plan. If God has a plan, it's going to happen, right? Whether we go with it, whether we go against it. If it's God's will, it's going to happen. So here we see this case of Jacob, this very imperfect person, being used, and he's part of God's bigger plan that allowed us to be where we are today. All right, so let's read through our text this morning, and we'll kind of tie all this together, I hope, and it'll make sense what we're trying to get across here. So this is in Genesis. All of our text comes from Genesis 29, and it starts in verse 12 and goes through 28. I'll read the first verse, and you guys read after me. It said, "And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father.
And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things.
And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month.
And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be?
And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel.
Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored.
And Jacob loved Rachel, and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter.
And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee, than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me.
And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her.
And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her.
And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast.
And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her.
And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for an handmaid.
And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me?
Laban said, It must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn.
Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years.
And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. Amen. All right, so kind of backing up here in verse 12. When you first read this, it's a little confusing at first. You think, well, Jacob's already lying to these people. You know, he's just met this woman who has deeply affected him just on meeting her. And he starts out, he says that he's her father's brother. Well, we take that as, no, he's not. That's not quite true. But the way they introduced people and the way the families worked then, that was just an indication that we're family. I'm related to your father. That's all it was. So Jacob had just met Rachel. This is following up right at the end of Tim's lesson from last week. He had just met Rachel, and he was apparently already smitten with her to the point where his reaction was to weep. Now, I know all you men in here love your wives deeply, but the first time you met her, did you weep? Now, you've probably wept a lot since then. But up to that, when you first laid eyes on her, we probably didn't weep. Okay. You might have been smitten. You might have been smitten. All right, but anyway, he says here in verse 12, he tells her he's her father's brother, but he's actually her uncle, right? Or his, they are actually cousins. His mother and her brother, or her father, are brother, sister, so forth. So he is not her uncle, he is her cousin. So at this time, we finally start seeing in Jacob, and Jacob had an experience on his journey that sort of changed the way he looked at things. But he's not being deceitful at this time. He's actually saying this, saying that they were brothers was just a way of saying we're of the same family. That's all I was trying to get across. So Rebecca, and we see in this first verse, in verse 12, she's excited to meet him. They met at the well. Oh, wow, you're related to my dad and all this stuff. she runs home and tells her dad the great news. I've met this man down by the well. He's come to see us, blah, blah, blah. All right? Now, I'm going to read the next two verses together, 13 and 14. And if you guys have comments as I go through this, please don't be bashful. Sometimes when you get into these Old Testament stories, it's more like just reading a history lesson than it is trying to pull the meaning out of it, that, some spiritual meaning of it. Of course, we know that there is, but anyway, sometimes you can read more like a history lesson. And it says in verse 13, and it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. Laban said to him, surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. So when Rebekah told her father the news, he went out to greet Jacob. He was all happy. He welcomed him. He brought him into his house. Kind of being very courteous and cordial and all that, and brings him in. And they catch up on all the family news, right? It's kind of what he says here. It kind of reminded me of, this is not quite the same as like today, when you get those Christmas cards from that relative that you don't see very often, and they put that, here's what we've done in the last year kind of thing, talking about kids that you haven't seen for years and years. You ever see, everybody ever get those stuff? This is before those days. So they're catching up on family news face to face, right? They had to talk, and I'm sure Jacob's got all kinds of stuff to tell Laban about what's been going on with mom back home and all this stuff. So anyway, he comes out, they get settled in, and according to Scripture, Jacob spends the next month there living in Laban's house, or in his home. And apparently he's kind of fit in. They've got a little routine, and he's sort of fit in. And we can pick up on that from the next few verses. I'm going to read 15 through 18 together here. And he says, and Laban said unto Jacob, because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. So, you have to remember back in these days, and in this society and that culture, it was all about agriculture, right? You had your flock, you grew whatever you did or you could. But people were pretty self-sufficient. It wasn't like running down to Walmart and picking up the stuff that you don't have or whatever. You grew it, you raised it, you did whatever. So it's an agricultural environment. And everybody works. Everybody chips in. So, here's Jacob, and we don't have much of a picture of him in the past being much of a go-getter, right? What we were told before Isaac, was old, that he was kind of the guy that hung around inside the house and did this and that, while his brother Esau was the outdoorsy, go out and hunt, fish, and do all that stuff. We don't really see Jacob as being much of a hard worker, but apparently he has jumped in, he's fit in, whatever his role is, and he's been pitching in. So one day Laban, whatever, came to him and said, look, we're family, but I don't expect you to work for free. Tell me what kind of wages you want, right? Sounds reasonable. He doesn't expect him to work for him for nothing. So he kind of, the text kind of takes us a little sideline and describes something that's going on. We already know that he has met Rachel by the well, and he's taken with her. She's beautiful. He just immediately was smitten with her. But there's also another daughter. Rachel's the younger daughter. He has an older daughter, Leah, also in the house. And it's kind of funny here because Leah was described, and this is something that we don't see too much, this description in verse 17. Leah was tender-eyed. What is it? Not tenderized. What does that mean to you guys? That description, what would that indicate to you guys?
The kind of look in her eyes.
Okay, all right.
She wasn't pretty like Rachel.
she's a little more plain. She was just, pleasant, but just plain.
Plain Jane.
Yeah, and it describes Rebecca, though, is beautiful. You know, she's well favored. Everybody likes her. Everybody's attracted to her. So she's this beautiful girl. So Jacob tells him, because Jacob had already fallen in love with Rachel. He's been in the house for a month. He probably loved her from the minute he saw her at the well. So he says, you know what? I'll tell you, here's what I'll work for you for. I'll work for you for the next 7 years if you will let me marry your daughter, Rachel. Laban's all about that. He's okay. So, Laban in verse 19 says, it is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. So, Jacob had made this proposal. 7 years of work for his youngest daughter's hand in marriage. Laban's like, okay, that's great. I'm not sure I would have worked for my father-in-law for 7 years. but hey, different times, right? So, but anyway, he tells him that he can marry his daughter. And Laban was all for it. He thought this was a great idea. He even said, you know what? It's better that I give her to you than some other man out here. So, sounds like a great deal, right? In verse 20, in 21, he says, and Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her. And Jacob said unto Laban, give me my wife, and the days are fulfilled that I may go in unto her. Jacob was so in love with Rachel that 7 years of toil, labor, whatever it was he did, we don't know what he did, it doesn't matter, it was 7 years, still a long time. To him, it only just seemed a few days. He was just happy to be around her, to be close to her, and he knew it was like dangling that carrot out there, you know. Laban's kind of got him. And that 7 years went by as if it was just a few days. Time passed very quickly. But at the end of the 7 years, he expects Laban to keep his end of the bargain. They made a deal, right? As far as we can tell, you know, it's a little surprising because all we've seen of Jacob so far is any way he can sneak something around somewhere, he's going to do it. If it benefits him, he's going to do. He's not above deceiving someone to get what he wants. But we can see that he has worked his 7 years as he promised, and now he's ready for his wife.
A little bit of reap what you sow.
That's right. That's what's coming up. So it's kind of funny that, you know, Jacob, one of the things that he seems to have gained over his journey that Tim talked about last week, the beginning of his journey, and then this time period now, he's learned patience. I mean, that's a good bit to wait, you know, to do this. So, but anyway, he's a patient man. He's waited. But now it's time. He's ready. Here's where the story takes a terrible twist. So Laban, in verse 22, it says, Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Laban, the happy father, gathered everyone together for this big wedding feast. So as we can see in 23 and 24 also, it says, and it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her unto him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah, his maid, for a handmaid. So Laban's plan wasn't quite the same as what he had promised. He talked about what goes around comes around kind of a deal. Remember, Jacob's been the guy who's been the deceiver. He's been the tricky guy who, I can do this and I can get that. So here he is, shoes on the other foot now. Laban, under the cover of darkness, said, you know, when the evening came, and for them that was as it starts getting dark, that's the evening. It's getting dark. He did give his daughter to Jacob, but not the one that Jacob had fallen in love with. So Instead, he brought Leah, his eldest daughter. So he slips him into the marital bed, the tent, whatever it was they're living in, and he puts her there instead of Rachel. Now, things were much, much different in those days. The betrothed did not know each other, okay, in the biblical sense. Wasn't like what you see so much more common today in the courtship of today. When apparently when Jacob went into the marital bed, he didn't know the difference. He just knew it's dark. There's his wife, he assumes, there, and he went in with his wife, all right, thinking that he is with Rachel. Think of this now. He doesn't even know he's been deceived at this point. But you sort of look now and you say, man, so this is, his mother is Rebecca, right? So she's the one that was married to Isaac, deceitful, helped him deceive his own father, her own husband, to get the birthright, to get the father's blessing. Did all this and passed that trait on to Jacob. He went along with all of it. He was not duped into any of that. He was a willing participant in all of that, ripping off his own brother and getting all this stuff from Dad. And now here we see Uncle Laban, who's apparently the same kind of personality. It is amazing to us. We wouldn't think that why would God pick a family like that to see his plan fulfilled? Why not pick some nice people? You have a wife, it just ain't the one you wanted.
And she was rather deceitful too, if you ask me.
Leah, absolutely. Family trait.
Did you know talking about Latin and stuff? Yeah, what came to my mind, we can't do valid old firm, and you're talking about that David had more than one wife. I got thinking about King Solomon. He was one of the most wise persons ever lived, and he had many wives, didn't he?
Yeah. Wives and concubines.
Yeah.
He was a glutton for punishment. Sorry. But anyway, so this family trait, they're just not honest people. But I guess maybe it was supposed to be an added bonus, and I guess maybe it did work out that way for Jacob, depending on how you look at it. Leah was also given a handmaid. It was a maid of Dad's, Laban's, and he gave this handmaid, Zilpah, to his daughter to be her handmaid. So I guess it's part of the package, the bridal package. So in verse 25, 25, he says, "And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said unto Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me?" You ever notice when it's on the other foot, when things kind of get flipped around, you're met with all this righteous indignation? I can't believe you did this to me. What were you thinking? Jacob was the same way, or had been at one time, because we know, maybe not for the last 7 years, maybe he's changed. He's on the right path. But now he's getting what's coming to him, right? He's been tricked just like he was. And I know that we don't always see this. Sometimes we don't see it for a time. Maybe we don't see it in this lifetime. There are always consequences for our actions. There are always consequences for the things that we say and we do. Sometimes the consequences are great. Sometimes the consequences are bad. You sort of look back on Jacob's life and what happened to him, and of course he's shocked by this. I can't believe you did this. Why did you do this to me? But he was the same kind of person. And he's seeing his consequences. He's seeing that he's been deceived just as he deceived others. So anyway, now he wanted a wife, this one. Now he's got two, because the handmaid goes along with the wife. But they weren't, either one of them were the ones that he had picked. So he's upset, and he talks to his new father-in-law. Why did you do this to me? I can't believe you did this. I served you for 7 years for Rachel, and you've tricked me. So in 26, 27, and 28, he says, and Laban said, it must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. So Laban does a little backpedaling now. He's been called on his deceit. You know, Jacob comes to him, why did you do this? I can't believe you did this. So he's got this explanation. Well, in my country, we can't do it that way. We can't give away the younger daughter in marriage before the eldest has been given in marriage. That's just not the way we do things here. But I still want to make it right. Okay? Would you trust him right now?
I have a question like that. What are concubines? I don't want concubine dogs.
Concubines are just women companions that he had that he was not married to.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. That's what the concubines were. So Laban tells Jacob, I tell you what, fulfill her marriage week, because now they have this, there's this week period that is apparently, you know, the wedding week, the marriage week, or whatever, that the husband and wife spend together. And he says, if you'll fulfill that week, I'll still give you Rachel for another 7 years of work. Does this sound like a fair deal at all to you? No. So not going to wait 14 years? It's a great deal. Now, I read when I was reading some of the study material for this lesson, there's some debate as to whether or not he and Rachel were also wed before the 7 years, right after the 1 week ended, or after the 7 years. So it's one of those things that really doesn't matter. The bottom line is he worked for 14 years to get the wife that he wanted. Now, he may have had her for that 7 years, don't know, doesn't matter. But he finally gets his true love as a wife. So things work out happily ever after for Jacob in this case. Now, that's the end of the text that we have for this morning, but read this lesson and say, okay, how one wife became 4. Where does it talk about 4 wives? Well, guess what? Rachel, when he gets her, she also has a handmaid. So now he's got the 2 sisters plus their handmaids. So he's got a full house. Poor guy. But you know, this is just a whole package. So he went from falling in love with this, I'm sorry guys, he falls in love with this one girl and wants to marry her, but he ends up with 4 wives. Again, what a deal. So God's plan and promise to Abraham, so think about this. God made a promise to Abraham, right? That his seed would go on forever, would be counted as the stars in the sky, the sands, all the sand that you could see. We didn't think Abraham was going to have any kids, and then Isaac wasn't going to have any kids. Now we have Rachel and Leah that are both married to Jacob. Now we're going to see the plan being fulfilled. Now we would think that Rachel, his love of his life, would be the mother of all of his children, right? Did not work out. That was not God's plan. If God's will is to accomplish something, you can be absolutely certain it's going to happen. Probably not the way we think it's going to happen. And we fall into that trap a lot, don't we? If we think that we're doing what God would have us do, we already have it pictured how it should happen, don't we? And exactly how it should work out. Very rarely works out that way. And God will carry out his plan and his will will be accomplished, even if he has to use very imperfect people to do his work, right? So I think we can sort of take away from this a lot, or among a lot of other things. A lot of times we feel led or asked to do a work for God, do we not? Do we not start making a lot of excuses sometimes? I'm not up to that. I'm not capable of that. I'm not the guy for that. I can remember years ago when Brother Roger tricked me into teaching Sunday school. He didn't trick me. I'm not meaning any disrespect. Roger started asking me if I was interested in helping teach Sunday school, and I thought, I can't do that. Number one, I hadn't been a Christian maybe a year or so, and he said, you know what, because I like to participate in Sunday school, and he saw that, and he asked me if I would help start teaching some. I did not want to be a Sunday school teacher. I'll tell you what's funny is, my work for the last several years is most of it is comprised of talking to people, making presentations to people. You all, because I didn't go to high school with anybody in here, my years in school, if I had to answer the roll, here, my face turned red, I broke out in sweat, public speaking, forget it. I'm not doing it. And here I am teaching Sunday, and I love teaching Sunday school, and I love standing and talking. As y'all can probably figure out, I like to talk. But God can, anytime we start thinking that we're not good enough, I don't have the skills, I don't have whatever, you can rest assured that if you'll bring the will to do it, God will give you the ability to do it. He doesn't ask you to be perfect to do a work for Him. Be willing, be obedient, and He'll take care of the rest. And we can see this with the way this story kind of plays out. All right, I'm done. I appreciate everybody.
I'm taking applications for security for Mark. Do you have any volunteers?
If Tricia's watching, that's all.
Gary, how'd you like to have 4 women tell you how to drive?